Hello, we'll start covering Chapter 2 in this mini lecture. I hope you got a good understanding in Chapter 1 of really the basics of operations and kind of some of the facets that are included in it. So in this chapter we'll discuss really how our operations strategy should be designed to fit with our corporate and our competitive strategy. And not so much in these slides, but sustainability is covered in the chapter. So of course you can read through the learning objectives, but just point out something on the first one there. Traditionally people have said, well, what do you need to have a company? Well, you need somebody to make something or deliver a service. You need someone to sell it, and you need someone to keep score. So that's kind of wrapped up in this first bullet point. We'll talk about 5 or possibly 6 dimensions with which you can compete to set your product or your service up to those standards. And I think that you'll find that most successful companies usually strongly compete on one of those dimensions, maybe 2, but I don't think they're usually going to be strong on all 5 or 6 of those. And then the next to last bullet point, we'll talk about how to measure productivity, and another word for that might be efficiency. We've talked about efficiency, I think, in the first chapter, so I kind of correlate those two, efficiency and productivity. And then we'll talk a little bit about how the marketplace, at least the financial marketplace, evaluates how well a company is doing from their operations and supply chain perspective. I think we've always been concerned with our shareholders, those people that own a part of our company, but more recently people have broadened that scope and have talked more about our stakeholders. So who is going to be impacted by what our company does? And that of course includes the shareholders, but it also includes our employees, possibly the government, the community. And so there's a lot of more considerations that we need to look at, a lot more people we need to consider, or agencies we need to consider, than just our shareholders. This triple bottom line is a relatively new concept, and I'll say that the economic or the financial is still going to be the main driver. How well are we doing? How are we compensating our shareholders who've taken a risk? But along with that, in more of a secondary role, but we're also evaluated more or measured more on our social performance. Are we treating people right? Are we giving back to the community? Things like that. And then also the environmental. Are we doing something that's degrading the environment or causing health issues for people? But I'll just say it again, to me, I think the economic or the financial is going to be the main one, but the other two are maybe a close second and third. So considering that triple bottom line, we need to set up our operation and our supply strategy so that we're supporting the overall strategies and policies of the company. So it's more than just producing a lot of items or delivering a lot of service with a limited amount of resources. It's how well does that whole function fit into our overall strategy. So look at the chart in the book. It's Exhibit 2.2 when you're reading through this, and I think it'll put it in a little bit more framework. To me, it's both a top-down planning process and a bottom-up. So you can see some of the arrows on the chart. We're planning at this Activity 1 level, and we're forcing those initiatives or those plans down to Activity 2 and down to Activity 3. But as things change at either Activity 2 or 3, then we're driving those changes back up to the top for a replanning. I'll post another exhibit for you. It's called a hierarchy, to show this in just a little bit different perspective. But really, if you look at this Activity 1 level, yes, we're doing annual plans, but we're looking out 3 to 5 years, and maybe in some businesses we're looking further out. And then when we drop down to the Activity 2 level, even though we're updating and refining it quarterly, we're still looking out longer term. And even at the activity 3, when we talk about sales and operations planning, and that's an important topic, we're going to do that monthly, but we're doing it on an 18-month rolling horizon. So we're continually looking out 18 months, even at the activity 3 level. So the point is here we need to determine how it is that we compete, probably on 1 or maybe 2 of these dimensions, and then set up our operation strategy to support this competition or this competitive nature. It's really going to depend the type of industry in, the type of company we are, which of these are most important. If we're a Walmart, then it's price, and that's really all we're concerned about. If we're a Tiffany or a Rolex or somebody like that, then we're looking about quality or maybe customization, which would kind of play into the flexibility topic. And personally, to me, I think the delivery speed and the delivery reliability, although they're 2 different topics, have kind of become rolled into one. Just think about it when you buy something. You want it fast, and you want it when they tell you you're going to get it. So I think those have almost blended together. And on the last bullet point, something that's made this more difficult is the length of the product life cycle. I mean, just think about cell phones as an example, such a limited product life cycle. So we're continually challenged to bring out a new product faster, and those product life cycles just continue to get shorter. As companies are continuing to rely more on their suppliers for the value add of the finished product, they're also relying on them for a lot more support, which may or may not really be related to the value add specifically. So when a new product is being launched, we're going to require that our suppliers give us a lot of input on the design of the product, because remember, they're going to be making a lot of that value add, and if we make something very difficult for them to manufacture, then they can't be efficient on that. So we're going to use a lot of what's called concurrent engineering. So the supplier and the manufacturer, the final manufacturer, will be very deeply involved with the whole design process and development process. And again, with the product life cycles becoming shorter, it just makes it more difficult, or gives us a bigger challenge to meet launch dates, because we got to have that new product, and if we don't hit the market with it before our competitors do, then we're going to lose sales, and we may even lose a lot of market position. And then what about when after the product is launched and out there on the market, we may be looking for our suppliers to do some of the after-sales service that's required for the product. Again, because they had so much input into the value add of the final product. The 4th point, with environmental sustainability being such a crucial topic right now, and you see commercials everywhere about, we're making a green product, or we have a green supply chain. So again, to deliver that green product, we're going to rely on our suppliers to make sure they're doing or making good environmental decisions in their design and in their production processes. And the 5th bullet point would usually involve things like customization and variety. So let's give the customer what they want. What color do they want? What size do they want? Whatever those dimensions may be. I don't mean physical dimensions, but whatever those things are that the customer wants, let's try to target our product as specifically as we can and offer those options. But again, there's going to be a trade-off there. What's the cost of those options versus the revenue we're going to receive from offering them. And really, from my experience, I think operations and supply chain management is totally about trade-offs. You're always going to be evaluating, well, what are the pros and cons of doing this, and what's our reward going to be for a certain investment or a certain amount of money that we're putting into something, and those always have to be evaluated. And looking at the little diagram clear at the bottom, Traditionally, the viewpoint has been, oh, if you want a good one, then it's going to cost extra. But really, with lean and total quality management, people have tried to at least narrow that difference, and let's see what we can do to produce a quality product at a competitive cost. So trying to get away from those actually being trade-offs and trying to do both simultaneously. And of course, that's easy to say and harder to do, but that's what companies are really striving to do now. And similarly on the x-axis, oh, do you want a custom one or do you want one off the shelf and delivered quickly? And again, people are trying to come up with ways to narrow that difference. So let's give the customer what they want as far as options, and let's give it to them quickly. And there's a theory or a production strategy called mass customization, which a lot of companies have tried to employ. So we'll still build a lot of products from the mass side, but we'll customize those as much as possible to what the customer is actually demanding. And again, easy to say, a little bit more difficult to do, but there have been a lot of initiatives and a lot of strides made in this mass customization field. So how do we get the business? Well, first of all, we have to be invited to the game, and that's another way of defining this order qualifier. So we have something good enough about our product or our service that we at least get considered as a candidate and maybe hopefully make it to the short list. But then we're going to have something that's much better than our competitors to actually win the order. And I'll say that the bars on both of these categories are continually raising, and also I would say they're raising at a faster or at an accelerated pace. So what used to maybe get the business for us, used to be an order winner, if we're still at that level, now we're only getting, and maybe not even getting, to have an order qualifier from it. So these things are going to be continually more demanding. We're going to have to change our production, change our strategies to try to keep up and keep ahead of our competitors. This slide is really leading up to, or actually the last bullet on it is showing a tool that we can use to make sure that our operation strategy is in line with our overall company or competitive strategy. So going back to those dimensions on which we compete, is it price, is it quality, is it flexibility, then is our operation really set up to make us strong on that competitive dimension? And a way you can do that is using a visual diagram called an activity system map. And look at the one in the book for IKEA. It's a pretty good example. And this will just kind of tell you, are we marching to the right orders, or are we doing something that's not consistent with our overall strategy? So if we're competing on cost, then productivity is going to be a key indicator that we're going to use. And again, to me, another way to say productivity is efficiency. And really just thinking of it basically, how much are we putting into the process and how much good value is coming out of it? That's a way to evaluate productivity. And anything that's coming out of a process that is not value added, it's called non-value added, but to me I like to just define that as waste. So anything that's not adding value is waste, and that's what we need to identify in processes and take initiatives and efforts to drive that waste out and reduce that waste, which will then increase our overall productivity. So the measurement of productivity can be very subjective. I've seen companies or operations reporting maybe 110% productivity. So the first question I would have is either what's wrong with your standards, or did you have just an exceptionally good day? So you really have to consider all the factors that are impacting these productivity measures. So one way to compare your productivity results is by benchmarking against other companies, either in your industry or just other companies that are being run very well. and that's sometimes called best of breed benchmarking or best of class benchmarking. So you really don't care if they're in the same industry, you just know that they're an efficient company, so you'll use their standards to benchmark against. And then another way to do it is, are we getting better? So, our productivity last month was 50%. Well, is that good or bad? Well, I don't know. But if we're 55% this month and 60 next month, then we're making progress. So again, the absolute number is maybe not so important. It has to be referenced either to other industries or to our past performance, and are we getting better or not. Also, we can measure the productivity different ways. We can look at all of our inputs, our labor, our energy, our raw materials, look at all those inputs and see how much is coming out as output. Or we can look at just specific measures. I've been watching this Gold Rush show on TV, and the partial measure that they're using right now in their mining operations in Alaska is diesel fuel being used in their equipment to gold coming out of their process. They're really not concerned about labor. I mean, the guys are just they're working, they're not being paid per hour, they're all sort of partners in this deal. So the only thing they're concerned about right now is, are we getting enough gold each day to pay for our diesel fuel and make us a little bit of profit? So that would be definitely a partial measure of productivity. So how is our company evaluated in the financial markets? And the second dash mark there kind of on the surface sounds pretty naive. Well, we can either sell more or we can lower our costs. Pretty obvious, but then when you think about it from a deeper standpoint, how can we sell more? Well, you go back to those competitive dimensions. Is it cost, is it quality, and is our operation actually supporting that competitive position, which would result in higher sales? And then the lower cost would be a function of productivity, and I'm not sure if I said lower cost, but the lower cost would be a function of our productivity and our efficiency. So although that statement sounds pretty naive, it really has a much deeper meaning when you consider how do our operations actually contribute to that or support that. I think it is important, and you can read in the book about the explanation of the one-time events. So, let's not take a lot of credit for our productivity increasing dramatically because something else that we had no control over has driven that. But one example I wanted to point out was productivity or efficiency of automotive plants in the U.S. And every year that it's measured, Nissan in Tennessee has the lowest hours per vehicle, lowest labor hours per vehicle that they produce. And they may well have, but I want to go back to this thing about partial productivity measures. So if you're only counting the labor hours of your direct employees that are going into that vehicle, it may not be including a lot of your costs that are still out there. So if we've subcontracted out some of our labor or more of our value added to our suppliers, they're doing more of the process for us. Yes, it's reduced our direct labor hours, but if you're only targeting that element, the direct labor hours, you're not looking at the total cost picture. So those partial productivity measures can probably get you in more trouble, at least than the full productivity measure. So just think about that when you hear these productivity measures reported. Is that really capturing my total costs, or is it just looking at one certain aspect of it? And if we are going to focus on the one aspect, then let's try to look at apples to apples comparisons as much as we can. So I hope this mini lecture has helped you, and as always, let me know through Blackboard Mail or give me a call if there's something that remains unclear. Thank you.